We can, yeah. It's not in present. We can't see them in presentation mode, though. We can only see them in there.
No?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So thank you very much for the introduction. And I structured my presentation in 4 aspects. So one is short introduction in Futuram, and then talking about UNFC, and then I will make example how UNFC can be used for specific projects, and then also how we think it can be used on national level. Futuram, which is for future availability of secondary raw materials in Europe, is based on the methodology developed in a preceding project called ProSum, and which was focused on availability of secondary raw materials and developing a concept how the composition of end-of-life materials can be collected and classified. And now in Futuram, we have in total 6 different waste streams, and one of them is also construction, demolition waste. And the one aspect of that, what we are doing is to look on the recovery process, not only about the availability, but also what happens during the recovery process, and with that to have the information about recoverability of secondary raw materials. And this information, this knowledge base, will be used to develop scenarios until 2050 to see how it will develop depending on if you recover only on that what is absolutely necessary or in comparison to state of the art, and what will be if you have consider also circularity aspects. And here comes another aspect. It is UNFC, which will be topic of this presentation today. And altogether, we want to develop a concept regarding secondary raw materials and also critical raw materials management in the EU. And what is UNFC? It's the short term for United Nations Framework Classification for Resources. And it is based on a long tradition in the mining sector, where classification was developed for fossil energy and minerals to communicate the reliability of expected quantities of a resource to potential investors. And this principle is also used to record the resources in a country, to say how much it is available. And when these quantities are technically feasible to extract under economically viable conditions, that is what called reserves. That means to know how much can really be extracted is something which is very important in the primary raw materials sector. And to combine these principles, which are different in fossil energy sector and minerals, was one issue to develop a harmonized procedure, which is under United Nations Framework for Classification. And it is globally unique because now, during the last years, it was enlarged to be applicable to all kinds of resources. And based on that, that means also not only, as Julia said, to be applied for anthropogenic resources, but also for renewable energy, and also for now recently developed for groundwater. And for that, it provides an efficient tool for resource management. And what does it mean? It is project-based, and it is three axes which are used. And with that is we have a matrix. One of these axes is the G-axis, which is from geology, and now it's called degree of confidence about the quantity of the materials to be gained. And these G4 means that the knowledge is very pure, and G1 means that it's very good knowledge about the quantities to be achieved. The second axis to be considered is the technical feasibility, F-axis. And again, 4 means there is no technology, and F1 means that the technology has a sound ground, and it is also a plant which is already established and can go in operation. But it is more than only the technical readiness level. It is also about the infrastructure which is needed for supply of all these materials to be treated and the products to be sold. And the third axis, the E-axis, is the more complex one because it consists, of course, about economic viability, which is important to know, but also about environmental and social viability in addition to legal aspects. So all these information are merged in one axis. And as you see, you have different boxes, and the question is how to use that. As I said, it is to develop a project, and the aim is typically to develop a commercially viable project. That means you start with a conceptual study, and based on the data, the results you have, there must be a decision to continue. And if it is, you see the option, you will make a screening phase. And again, there must be an evaluation, and based on that, to make a decision to continue, to have a pre-feasibility study, and then a feasibility study. And if everything is good, you have an implementation of this project. That means it takes a lot of time. And with each step, the amount of time and also money to spend to develop the project increases. And now if we combine it with the UNFC concept, means that as soon as you start with the screening phase, you are maybe one of these boxes, which are not one of the gray boxes in this UNFC scheme. And based on the first ideas, the results, you see, oh, that is prospective project. Then it is, you can classify it with E3, F3, and G4. So you start with a pre-feasibility study based on these results. And again, you have to collect data, you make the assessment, and now the next decision can be, it is not viable, you have not enough reasoning to continue, or you have enough information so that you can rate this project as potential viable and start with a feasibility study. And again, after a while, you have to see if you got all this needed information and also the permits to continue and have a viable project, and that means to implement this project. And so that is how you move from one box to the next one based on these data you collect. And the benefit of UNFC is that you have the transparency and you can provide the comparability of these projects. You can decide which one of the options you have should be chosen and how to proceed. And to make it more clear, what does it mean to apply that? I want to go to the next aspect, which is how UNFC can be used for specific case studies. So we know that in the recycling sector, this application of UNFC is new. It is not usual to have a classification. And for that, we are thinking to make it easy to apply, to develop a systematic approach with 7 stages to guide the project developer through all the process. And that means that we start with the definition of the project to collect the main information, which will be part of these outcomes at the end, the exclusive summary of the project, and also to define the project, to say what is within the boundary of the system to be considered, what goes in, what is treated, what goes out, but also to define the objective of the project. What is the aim to gain at the end? And this may differ from site to site. And also to say, what is the outcome? Is it only to have to fulfill all that what is mandatory based on the legal aspects? Or are there other aspects to be considered regarding to have a higher quality of the recycling products, or to consider sustainability aspects regarding SDGs? So these aspects have, of course, an impact on the classification. And that means that the context of evaluation must be also defined from the beginning. And that brings us to the next step. Based on these decisions, we have a collection of factors which are decisive for the classification. And these are collected in the stage 3, and they are rated, so it assessed in the stage 4. That means here is the heart, the core of these activities, to collect all this information necessary for the project for each of the factors, and to make also to see which indicators will be used, how they are used, and which knowledge base is on the background. And that is important because based on that, the result defines if you have fulfilled all the requirements or something is missing. And that all this information goes to the next step to classify and make the report. So that all these factors have a categorization, and these gives an overview about all the status of these specific parts. That means based on this table with all this information, it is clear to see which part of the criteria is fulfilled and which part is not achieving these goals set by at the beginning with the project definition. And all these factors under each of these criteria are brought together, collected, and bring to the UNFC class. So the UNFC class is a code informing which maturity level the project has, but in background you have all this information showing what is what is achieved in all these different parts of these regarding these different criteria. And in the end, of course, we need a UNFC report showing what is the result of that. And also, that is also this concept, considering that we have different stakeholders and the level of information differs based on them, who will get the report. That means an investor needs a lot of more detailed information than the public who will want to see in as much this project fulfills the requirement regarding environment and social aspects. And to make it easy to use, we have we developed a web tool, the SARA for UNFC, which is a structured anthropogenic resource assessment, leading the user or classifier through all these 7 stages and preparing at the end to have this template with the report for the report, which can be used and finalized. So this UNFC for anthropogenic resources is helps to communicate with the code, the status of the project, but we see the need for the systematic approach, structured approach to with a definition and assessment in line with UNFC, to have a holistic overview about the current status of the project, and with that to communicate transparent and consistent data and make it easy to compare different projects. And with that, also the end user of these classification results gets an overview and can identify these drivers of the project, see the potentials of the project, and also the barriers to proceed or aspects which have to be solved if there is interest to continue with the project. And with that, we expect that it enables fact-based communication with all different stakeholders, and also to provide a solid basis for decision-making. And with that, I want to go to the next aspect, what can be provided by this approach, so to use UNFC on national level. As I said, it is in primary raw materials sector, it is used for resource accounting. And the principle, it is to look at all these different sites. So we use also UNFC for extractive waste on national level. That means to look at all these sites where are tailings or mining waste, and to evaluate each of them and classify it. And with that, it is possible to say how much of these sites fulfill the criteria regarding viable projects, how much materials can be extracted regarding potential viable projects, to see which of them are non-viable, and where we see the options for prospective projects in the future. And so this is an ideal approach, because there is a detailed information of all these projects which are available in a country. But if we continue and go to the recycling sector, it is more complex, because we have not only one site and to look what happens there and how much we can extract. We have all this value chain with these collection systems, pre-treatment, treatment, and all these different transport between that. So that means it is much more difficult to collect all this information to make a bottom-up approach. And for that, we are also thinking to have another approach by starting on the high level, using mass flow analysis, and not only to look at the availability of secondary raw materials, but also how much of that could be recoverable. So recoverability, which is to get to this overview, and then to map the recycling capacities of the plants all over the country, and to get more information about what is really available, and to see in as much also are reports available or are information reported somewhere, to have a more detailed information about the processes. And then based on that, it is possible to look at different sites and make at least one example per collection system or treatment system, to understand much more detail what's happening, how much can really be recovered, to have a better estimation about the real recovery potential. And with that, so I hope I could show that UNFC is a powerful tool for resource management, because we have a harmonized approach to assess and classify projects which is comparable to primary raw materials. And we have also this way to use that specifically for site-specific projects which start from a concept until implementation with the principles of UNFC, with a holistic view of all these aspects which have to be considered, and also to use these principles on national level to understand how these materials can be gathered in the country, what happens in total, and with that to develop an instrument for strategic decisions. And with that, we hope that, or we expect that UNFC supports stakeholders in fact-based decision-making for secondary raw materials and also critical raw materials management. So with that, thank you for your attention and look forward for your questions.
Thank you very much, Soraya. That was a lot of information in quite a short period of time. And I know that Tom, for instance, I know is very familiar with this, but I know that many members of our audience, this might be the first time that they've heard about the UNFC. So it may be, there should be lots of questions, but I guess it might be difficult to know where to start. But does anybody want to raise their hand, or you can put questions in the chat as well? I think while people are getting their thoughts in order, I think some of the questions, I think that's a good slide to show in relation to the questions that might arise. This one where you show the 3-axis methodology of the UNFC and the different aspects that are taken into account in the classification. No questions yet. People are overwhelmed, I think. But I think maybe I think a lot of the questions that often are asked about it. Oh, I see Mohammed has a question, and Tom and Mohammed. Okay, let Tom go first. He's raised his hand a fraction of a second earlier.
So I don't know if Mohammed beat me to it, but I'll go first because yeah. I was just wondering, so obviously I've had some experience thinking about this for primary raw materials, and something that's often people ask me, and I never have a good answer for, is the kind of issues around the kind of first social and environmental viability. I think there's often a sort of perception that UNFC has this kind of really strictly defined, and people often come to it looking for kind of a template of kind of like what metrics they should be using to assess these, whereas in fact actually it's very subjective. And I think initially also UNFC was touted as a good alternative to those industry specifications you mentioned, because they didn't specify these things either, but actually neither does UNFC. And I have difficulty when people ask me about this, really defining kind of, well, actually, what should you be looking at? What are these things being assessed against if we're using them to compare against projects? So that's a problem I've had from the primary raw material side. And I just was wondering if that's something you considered or thought about, or was on your radar from the kind of the secondary side.
Yeah, indeed, it is. We had also a lot of discussion. What should be the topic? What should be the goal of that? And it was always the point, to make a project, to implement at the end the project means to fulfill these mandatory aspects. And the question was, is it enough or not? And why should we need classification for just to say what project developers always do? And I think that the benefit of UNFC is just to have the same principles to be applied for all projects in the same way, so too easy to compare the projects. But it makes it absolutely necessary to have the same factors under these criteria, so otherwise you cannot compare them. And And it is something which is quite important. In one of our case studies, which is about recovery of phosphorus from silt sludge, we see that, yes, you have one project, all of them maybe produce phosphorus, but the quality of phosphorus is not the same. That means we need also criteria to say what is the result of this recovery, and to show that. So in one case, maybe you have phosphorus, but with phosphorus you have also all the different kind of heavy metals. In the other case, not. So it is one aspect is regarding the environmental impact of this product. The other aspect is, of course, the higher quality makes also, you can expect a higher, you can sell it in a higher, with a higher income price. And that could make also the project again viable. So by comparing these concepts with the same principles, you can see what happens if you change one of the aspects. It is not only an effect on economy, it has also an effect for the environment, which can be immediately shown. And you can, and hopefully that is convincing these project developers to go in a more costly way, in a direction to develop a project which might be more costly and requires more investment. But at the end, you have a material which is of higher quality and also makes it also viable, economically viable at the end. So it is, we have to test, we have to show how it works, but I think that is one of the benefits that you can see immediately together with these changes regarding technology, environment, and economy, also the implications for environment and social aspects. And you can also show immediately what does it mean if you have a legislation change in the future. You can make the same scenario for the future under the same constraints, but with the new legal aspects. You can have this, so you have these two scenarios which can be compared.
Thank you, Soraya. Mohammed, you have a question still.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, first of all, Soraya, for this really informative and comprehensive presentation. To be honest, I've got a couple of questions, but mainly related to the benefit of the attendees of this webinar, just to understand, extend a little bit your presentation, because I've been involved in, as you know, with the MINIA and the working group on UNFC. So I think maybe from first question is related to the difference of implementation of the framework for primary raw materials and secondary raw materials, which is easier? Are they the same in terms of implementation? And the second one is maybe in the UK, in the construction industry, I don't think a lot of people have heard about UNFC. I can now see the list, for example, Ben from Reusefully, Helen from Saint-Gobain, and maybe Tom from BRE can give us information if they have heard about it. And then what do you think it should be done? Because it's going to be a very useful tool in terms of awareness and the benefit of this tool, that at least the construction industry will be aware of it and can benefit from its implementation. Thank you.
Well, I think that it's the point that, of course, nobody in this sector, in the recycling sector, nobody heard ever about classification. And that is why we think that it is important to make it easy to use, and that why we developed this structured procedure. But of course, you have to know, why should I do that? It's nice, but it makes it not interesting. We have now a little bit, now in Europe, we have a good situation that we have the Critical Raw Materials Act, and they address explicitly that you should use UNFC. So it makes it much easier to say, well, let's talk about it. But of course, I think that is this holistic way to look at this concept, and that can be used for all stakeholders, makes it attractive. So if you have the investors, they have the same principles like the manager, and also the authorities, and also the authorities who have to make decisions on high level about strategic aspects. They can use the same principles. So we have one concept using from different perspectives, different needs, but the information level is the same. And so you have not to look in 100 papers and documents to find where it is, what is written, and so on. I think that is something which is most interesting, to have this common communication base to provide that for everyone who is involved in this topic. And I hope that this makes attractive to use UNFC, because it is the same language used by all disciplines.
Absolutely. I think case studies will help a lot, like a benchmark, an example. For example, we have got a manufacturer with us here, Saint-Gobain. We have other stakeholders in the center, where maybe a case study from a manufacturer perspective and how they look at the UNFC framework and how it could be beneficial to them. I think it could be quite.
Maybe as an illustration, it would help if I talk about the case study that one of the case studies that we're doing for Futurum, which is on production of cross-laminated secondary timber. You may be aware, it's not a mineral-based construction material, but it is a building material. But at UCL, we've been developing the idea of taking timber from demolition and turning it into engineered timber, cross-laminated secondary timber, and glulam. And so one of the case studies that we're doing for Futurum is we're looking at that as production of CLST, cross-laminated secondary timber, as a project, and then going through the different aspects of the axes of the classification system to and evaluating them to come up with a classification. It's the first time this has really been done, I think, in construction. So it's a learning experience, aside from the fact that CLST in itself is a learning experience. We're also doing a case study on recovery with data that ORMS is providing to us, based on pre-demolition auditing, and then the actual project information from a building refurbishment site in London. And I think, this is one of the challenges with this whole process is the availability of the data that you need to do a classification. And I think we need to approach that from two ways. One is by keeping the classification simple enough that it's actually going to be feasible to provide the kind of data. But on the other hand, I don't think we provide enough data about environmental and social impacts, for instance, as it currently stands. And so there need to be more systems put in place so that in fact, we will collect that kind of data going forward. I don't know whether the discussion has caused anybody to have any thoughts that they'd like to share themselves about how they might apply this. Oh, Hisham, please ask your question.
Yes, thank you very much. Hello, Julia, and hello, everyone else. And thank you very much, presenter, for your presentation. I have a follow-up question. I'm not sure if it's very, very relevant, but to the previous slide, I saw this framework that represents UNFC, and it has this technical feasibility metric to it. And I wonder if there is a pre-classification step to this, or the technical feasibility only assessed based on established relationships for recycling. So is it slag used in cement? reuse of timber in CLT, or is there room for further identification of potential valorization of waste in this technical feasibility metric?
Well, there is, you define your project. So you have all the potentials to say, what is your project? You say, my intention is to do this and that. That is my goal, and that is reported. So the classification is based on that, what you want to achieve at the end. So it is, yeah. When for that I made it more easy to use this part here. So the second stage, you say what you want to do, what should be the product you want to get, what goes in, what is what you are using, and what you are treating, and what goes as a product, and that defines your project.
Yes, that's very clear. But is there like sort of a database that could help a user determine the relative score between two paths to recycle a certain waste based on these different metrics?
Well, I don't think that we have not such a database to say we can compare them directly. So the project developer has the freedom to do that. And so we don't say you have to take this or that database, or you have to do that. So you have, and that is something which has to be recorded in the stage 4. What do you use? Which database are used for the assessment? How do you do that? Which indicator you use? And that is part of the report, so that you can understand how you came up with the classification. So it is all included, but you are not forced to go this direction or the other one. We are in the beginning, so we have not a standardized procedure. Maybe at the end there will be, that now we have, the moment we are working on the legal aspects, what has to be considered to have and what is mandatory to have at the end a viable project. But now there are also standard developed regarding circularity, and we have to see how that can be applied, so that you have a higher standard than that what is mandatory, which is, I would say, is desirable, but it is because you have the standards. You have to consider that. And something which is now under development, to have a standard for sustainability. And again, it is a step further. And based on that, you can describe, you use the same principles, but which make it easy to understand how you did it. But at the end, you have the classifications based on your specific project.
Thank you.
I think you make a good point, Hisham, about the, I think ultimately there will have to be some kind of a database, or it would be useful if there were a database that would help people do these analyses. And because, as Soraya has said, this is in the early stages, that doesn't exist yet, but it's certainly something I think that we can work towards. I see Thomas has a question. Thomas Bassett, please ask your question.
Yeah, I suppose it's less of a question, more of a comment, I guess. But from BRE's side, we've had and I suppose supported what we have, what is named the Green Guide for construction materials, and that was established very long time ago and has been, continuously supported and developed. And that looks at, materials sourced in different countries around the world, and then you can compare them. Certainly in the UK, I suppose it's meant to be a little bit more international now, but compare the construction types, I suppose. So if you're doing a roof or a wall or whatnot, against resources from different areas. Now that's based upon an environmental assessment. I'm really intrigued by this approach and this this method of assessing, I suppose, resource extraction or resource delivery, depending upon where you are, and how that it may not necessarily feed directly into the Green Guide, but again, it gives it a much deeper consideration and understanding of circularity, of resources, of reuse. And I'm now trying to figure out how we can expand our offering at BRE based upon the outcomes of this, this methodology. So thank you very much for the overview today. It's been really terrific. And now I'm going to be having my head spin a bit. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
And I think also we don't want to invent something new. That's what we want to make, to provide the framework and to see how all that what is already developed and which is well established can be implemented in this concept. And so because that makes this concept can be used for all these different kind of waste streams, and it can be used also with, it is applicable for renewable energy. That means also where you have the link between waste and energy, you can also use the same principles. It is not something you don't leave your system. It is always the same systematic approach.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions? I think we've actually run by our theoretical time frame, which we always pass. So I think it would be probably a good time to close now, as people have the rest of their afternoons to be getting on with. I'd